Hey, loyal Krista Makes a Podcast listeners. It's your host, Krista Makes here. I'm sure the majority of you know, but just in case you don't, I'm also the guitarist and one of the vocalists in Less Than Jake. And I'd like to invite each and every one of you to check out the Less Than Jake online store. We have t-shirts, hats, hoodies, pullovers, jackets, vinyl records, socks, tote bags, and so much more. And for the whole month of September, we're offering 15% off with the promo code KristaMakes. That's right, just enter KristaMakes at checkout to receive 15% off your order. With each purchase, you are automatically entered into a contest where one lucky winner will receive the ultimate Less Than Jake prize pack at the end of the month. Head over to LessThanJakeMerch.com. That's LessThanJakeMerch.com and enter KristaMakes at checkout to receive 15% off your order. Thanks for listening and happy shopping.
What's new from Apple? There's the new iPhone 16 Pro, built for Apple Intelligence. And it comes with the all-new camera control, giving you an easier way to quickly access your camera tools. The new Apple Watch Series 10 has our biggest display and our thinnest design ever. And this? It's the sound of active noise cancellation, now available on one of 2 new AirPods 4 models. So quiet. Check out all of the new products and new features at apple.com. You can even buy yourself something new. See apple.com for product availability updates. Apple Intelligence coming this fall.
Hey gang, today's guest is Mike Edwards, guitarist and lead vocalist for the alternative rock band Jesus Jones from Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire, England. Together we take a deep dive into the writing, recording, and inspiration behind the smash hit single, Right Here, Right Now, taken from their 1990 album, Doubt. What a song and what a lyric. We talk about memories a lot here on Krista Makes a Podcast. In particular, how memories will forever keep a song alive. And man, do I have a ton attached to this one. Released as a single exactly 1 month after I started my freshman year of college at the University of Florida. It's no surprise that Right Here, Right Now was the most played song at college radio in 1991. The song's lyrics talk about ushering in a new decade. And as I dug deeper, Mike explained things within the lyrics that are now both glaringly obvious and fascinating. This was the only song on Doubt that wasn't produced by Mike. That hat went to Martin Phillips, who Mike credits for helping him create this magic. And yes, we've heard this many times before, but according to Mike, this song was written in about a half hour. And the recording? Well, it didn't take much longer than that. So for all this and an ode to Tracy Chapman, don't you dare go anywhere.
Hey, hey, have you heard? Krista Makes a Podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Krista Makes a Podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Krista Makes a Podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Krista Makes a Podcast.
Well, hello there, Mike.
Good evening, or good afternoon for you, or good morning if you prefer, whichever you like. Hello.
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. That's all I'm going to say, you know. How's the weather over in the UK right now? I can't tell. Is it sunny there? It was sunny yesterday when we spoke.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're back to the kind of usual standard issue, 80% cloud cover, 80% of the time. Yeah, that's the joy of global warming. We don't really get a summer anymore.
Fair enough. Well, I was telling my producer, Chris, before we started rolling that, and my listeners know this, I talk about it all the time, you know, the memories that we have attached to songs, that's everything. And those memories are so strong. Okay, they can take you right back to where you were when you first heard that song. I know you've heard it from fans. They'll come up, oh, I heard this was my wedding song. This was my graduation song. And wow, the memories that I have attached to this track. And my first year of college was 1991. And it's no surprise to me, Mike, when I was researching for the song, that Right Here, Right Now was the most played song at college radio in 1991. And I've just, man, I took a deep dive the past couple days and it just took me right back there. I went to university, my first day was my parents' anniversary, June 26th of 91. It just so happens that Right Here, Right Now peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 on July 27th of 91, about 1 month after that. And just look what the song has done, since then. I mean, with the exception of an EP in 2004, the band didn't release any new material between 2001 and 2018. But a ton happened during those years, particularly with this song. The single Right Here, Right Now was resurrected in 2006 as an advertising jingle for Kmart, in an image campaign for CBS News, and in promos for the now defunct TV channel Tech TV. The Ford Motor Company used the song in their 2010 advertising campaign. And today, the song lives on not only in everyday life, stores, restaurants, elevators, sporting events, and social media. It's incredible. The longer that, if you have a hit like this, that your career goes, you never know what opportunities are going to come up. And take us back. Do you remember writing Right Here, Right Now?
Yeah, I do actually, which is unusual for me. The in-joke within the band is they'll talk about some wild and crazy event and I'll say, was I there? Yeah, I do. It was written when the drummer, Jen, and I were sharing a tiny apartment in North London. We'd had some success already with the band. And what I mean by that is that we'd had one album out, the first album, Liquidizer, and then the second album, all the singles most of the singles were released in advance of the album. So we'd had one or two hits by that point already. And I was writing Right Here, Right Now. I can remember really clearly his horrible little bedroom, rented place, with a tube train just on the other side of the road that you could hear all the time. Yeah, and I remember watching it. We had a tiny little television, like really small, like, I don't know, 6-inch screen, something like that. And watching stuff on the television, which kind of provided me with some of the inspiration, which I'm sure we'll come to. But yeah, I can remember the specific location, the kind of the feel of the time. I can remember quite a lot of aspects of the writing, but I can also remember the kind of overview of where we were in our career and what it felt like at that point. So yeah, I do actually have quite clear memories of it.
Well, you guys had initial critical acclaim. You were just mentioning with your 1989 album Liquidizer, in particular the single Info Freako, which featured buzzing rock guitars and samples and a hip hop sensibility, that was new at the time. That was something that was, I don't know if you want to use the term cutting edge, but when that decade came to an end, and I'm a glorified 80s kid. I loved the 80s, but even I was kind of like, okay, it's time for something new. And when this type of style came along, and then combine that with the fact that I was a sucker for anybody singing in a British accent. I mean, that just appealed to me. It was, I don't know. It was just kind of mysterious, pre-internet. It's kind of like, wow, anytime it was an English accent, I absolutely loved it. The first single from the record was Real, Real, Real. And when I went back and I checked that song, I'm like, oh my gosh, I recall hearing that before I heard Right Here, Right Now. And I didn't remember that until I went back and listened to the track. Again, the single sold over 1 million copies, won a BMI award, and as I said, was the song most played at college radio in 91. Martin Phillips was the producer on the track. You produced the rest of the record, but this is one you co-produced with Martin. How'd that come about?
Not a co-production. It was Martin through and through.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm very pleased about that because my original demo, all of my songs in that era always start out with the idea of what would it be like if you mix this with that, and they'd often be two really very different things. And so one of the things I wanted to get in there was Sign of the Times by Prince, for reasons, again, that we'll probably come to. So I took, if you go 55 seconds into Sign of the Times by Prince, there's a 2-bar loop. You take that 2 bars, and that played all of the way through the song, and I then just played the rest of the song over the top. And if it were me, I would have not only Prince going all the way through the background, I'd also have the Jimi Hendrix guitar solo in. That Martin was very astute in thinking, yeah, we'd be better off if we took those out and replaced them with you, Mike, playing. And I'm glad he did. He'd been stung by that because he'd produced a band a year or so before, called The Beloved, really really good band, and they had a hit single, but they'd sampled an opera singer. It's a lovely little hook in the song, but this opera singer had been in a grocery store one day, and she'd heard herself singing someone else's record, and that was, I would imagine that would be one of the first lawsuits, successful in her case, and Martin was making very sure that we didn't get stung like that again.
Well, good for him, because really that was kind of uncharted territory. That was like the Wild West then. People were starting to put samples in songs and doing that. And it was kind of like, well, how do I get paid for this? I'm the originator of the track.
Yeah, I mean, it was the Wild West, absolutely. The point we were making these records, no one had really kind of been slapped down for it. And it was very much a kind of an idea of, well, it's out there, just take it. I guess it was a kind of extension of, say John Lennon, the harmonica thing in Love Me Do came straight off someone else's record, different speed, maybe a bit different key, who knows. But for us, it was a kind of extension of that. Well, yeah, it's stealing influence somewhere in between, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it was. I'd say a year or so after that, things got really tight. And at that point, it no longer really became cool to have bits of other people's records lift straight on your own.
Now, this was, I'm assuming late 80s, early 90s when you wrote the song. How were you writing then when you were doing demos? You're talking about samples. There was no digital recording, Pro Tools. And I mean, if anything, there was some digital editing, but it was in its infancy. These thoughts come in your head. Hey, I'd like to take this Prince sample or this Jimi Hendrix sample. How were you creating the demos then?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I didn't get into recording with a computer for another year or two after that. I'd gone and splashed out a 12-track tape recorder. It used, I think the tape in it was very similar to a VHS. It might even have been VHS, and you recorded on that in the same way, I'd been using a 4-track Porter Studio 2 years before that.
Were those ADATs?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, pretty sure.
Okay,
pretty sure it's one of those. And let's have a think. So I then have the drum machine that I think our guitarist had stolen from someone else, was used as a kind of sequencer. It would accept MIDI from the ADAT, so it would then play all the samples from the samplers, which we'd use from the get-go. The first thing we did when we got our record deal was to buy proper samplers, because I'd only had what is in effect a kind of looper pedal. So we had the samplers, and they were triggered via MIDI from this ADAT, this 12-track recorder. So that's how, and of course I'd then just sing and play over the top of that. So it was, it was pretty basic, certainly compared to today, where everything is so much easier.
Well, a couple more things about the song, and we're going to jump in. The song hit its peak, number 2, Billboard Hot 100, again on July 27th, 1991. The song was kept out of number 1 by Bryan Adams. Everything I do it for you.
Oh, don't remind me.
I know. And the number, old Bryan Adams. And the number 3 song at the time was EMF's Unbelievable. And let's pivot back real quick to Martin Phillips, because, he was producing Was Not Was, Erasure, London Beat, among others. EMF, there was a ton of bands coming out this time. Soup Dragons, Ned's Atomic Dustbin, that I absolutely loved. And it just seems like you guys were on the forefront, but it seemed like you were at the right place at the right time too. It's just like the perfect storm for this kind of music was coming to fruition.
Yeah, but it was very deliberate. I'd obviously been kind of in rock bands for a long time preceding that, but as a fan of music and living in London and kind of experiencing the London scene, which it's at this point it's hard to kind of overstate just how important acid house was. All the music playing in in the clubs then. It was a revolution in clubbing terms, and obviously, musical terms. And as you say, that kind of hip hop sensibility as well. For me, it just seemed really obvious. Again, back to the thing of why don't I mix this with that, two very disparate things. But it just seemed really obvious. Well, I like rock music and I like this house music and I like this hip hop stuff. So why not just find a way to mix it all together? I mean, it seemed, like I say, it seemed obvious to me. It was helped by the fact that there were people that preceded us. I think really the people that kind of deserve the most praise are a band called Age of Chance from the UK, from I think Leeds in Yorkshire. And in about 86, I think they were using samplers a lot with a kind of rock sound. And of course, Pop Will Eat Itself, who preceded us, and they'd done a similar kind of thing in a different way. For me, the band that really got it right was the Shaman, because they were taking kind of more traditional song structures, unlike say Age of Chance or Pop Will Eat Itself. They're taking more traditional song structures, more kind of familiar melodies and stuff, but having the backbone of this technology running through it. And they were hugely influential on me. I used to go and see them around a lot in London. And speaking to the band later on, I figured out I got this entirely wrong, but I figured out technologically the way they were doing it on stage. I got it wrong, but it created us with a way of working live so we get these things going. Happy accident. So yeah, like I said, it's making the music we made at that time just seemed right. I wouldn't say it was an accident. It was very deliberate, and I did want to stand out from all the other bands around us, and that provided a very easy way of doing it. So yeah, it was carefully designed rather than being an accident.
Well, and nothing was too weird, as you know, in the early 90s. The term, once alternative rock was coined, that could mean everything from, goth to whatever, as long as it was different than what was being played on commercial radio. And it just ushered in a whole new time. I want to jump into the track. It's 3 minutes and 9 seconds. I have so many questions.
Okay, great.
And the first question is off the top. We get 2 intros, and I don't know if there's a term for a coda at the top of a song, Mike. Is that just an intro? Because this very first part only happens once in the song. And I even went back and listened to the song before it on the record. And I was like, well, maybe that song ends. And, a lot of times back in the day, we'd make out full albums and songs would run into each other. And then when you went to make a single, you'd chop it somewhere. And maybe this is where they chopped it. But no, this is the actual intro. It's a swooshing sound panned left to right, followed by 4 bars of a drum loop. A hollow synth sounds almost like a wood block mixed with a flute, and a distorted guitar panning sporadically right and left. And that comes to an end when the electricity gets pulled on a vinyl record. This part is unrelated to the rest of the song. It's awesome. What was the thought here with that thing at the top? Because when the next part comes in, what I'm calling intro 2, when the guitar comes in, it seems like the song could have started right there. And did that drive radio programmers crazy?
I have no idea about the last question. None at all. I couldn't answer that. You might have to speak to someone from the US record company. I think the intro 1, as you call it, which sounds like a good description, it's more kind of setting the scene, because that guitar riff is such a crucial thing through the whole of the song that I wanted to just have a bit of build up before it, but also it kind of it gives you the groove. It kind of lets you know what you're about to be getting. It's a antipasti, really. I'm
sure there's some people that listen to my show that are like, speaking of me, God, that guy is such a nerd. You don't know how many times I rewound this song to listen to this part. I've heard this song so many times, but until I got it under the microscope here and I'm looking at it, I'm going, what was the idea here? I love it. It's so cool. I never thought about it before until this. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting, because that guitar part is just so iconic. It's so great when it comes in. So I could kind of see you're thinking of, has to have a little setup. We rope him in and then we give him the guitar part.
Yeah, also intro one kind of has a couple of elements that are essential. Well, that give you an insight into the way the track came about. I mean, that guitar style is featured later on in the guitar solo, the kind of distorted
Yes.
guitar you talk about, but also the kind of the synthy woodblocky thing you're talking about. There's kind of that beepy sound that is both played
Yes.
forwards and backwards. That is a kind of tip of the hat to both Sign of the Times by Prince and the Simple Minds version that provided the inspiration for the track in one way.
September, my cousin tried to leave it for the very first time. Now it's doing horse. It's June. It's silly, no, when a rocket ship explodes.
Not necessarily great. I didn't much like the Simple Minds cover of Sign of the Times. In a way, kind of on principle, I thought you're singing about how bleak and dour the mid 80s are, and we're at the end of the 80s, start of the 90s, and the Berlin Wall has just come down. You've got the wrong sentiment for the time. There, and I'm going to write the correct sentiment as I saw it for the time. So that those little woodblocky sounds, whatever they are, I think they are similar to the ones in the Simple Minds track, and certainly very similar to the stuff that goes all the way through Prince's work of genius, Sign of the Times.
I absolutely love that. Got to ask, is this a DX7 with the bass here and the brass that we hear later, the horns?
No, the horns would almost certainly be from when you bought an Akai S950 sampler back in those days. You got a demonstration. You got a demonstration floppy disk with it, and one of the samples or the group of samples on there was a brass thing, and it's that. That's what that is. Again, because so much of the backing track of my original was just that 2-bar loop of Sign of the Times, quite a lot of the instrumentation comes from Martin. So what he would just kind of get a groove going, and I'd be thinking, I'd say yes or no, I like that, I don't like it. I wouldn't at that point be looking too much into was it a DX7 or not. No, Martin, probably not, because Martin Phillips is very much a kind of a real kind of old school synth kind of guy, where he had this wall of synths. One of those things where you see people with like 300 million leads patching one thing into another. That was Martin's kind of thing, and he would spend half a day just getting exactly the right tone for one sound.
Again, right now, I could go into my computer and I could manipulate a sound with 400 different plugins. It would take me 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But back then, what kind of manipulation was going on? You'd find some rudimentary sample on a floppy disk, and then would Martin take it and be like, hey, I put this delay on it and some reverb, and look what I did. I looped it and put it backwards. Were those kinds of creative elements going on?
Yeah, I mean, my approach to sampling was really brutal and basic, to the point where, in fact, if the album version of Who, Where, Why on Doubt, the album that Right Here, Right Now is on, the bass drum on that is actually is behind all the way through the song. It's late all the way through, because when I sampled that particular bass drum, I left a little bit of noise at the beginning of it, so it's out of time all the way through, and that kind of shows the level of attention that I pay to things. Martin got a lot more kind of analytical and forensic. Martin is he's a fascinating guy, because he's very, I think he has a degree in physics, but he's also one of the most artistic people I've ever met. So he's got a real kind of yin and yang thing going on. So he would really take a drum loop apart and mess with it in all sorts of ways that I wouldn't even think about doing until 10 years down the line. I was much more. I always used to think if Malcolm Young got into sampling, Malcolm Young from AC/DC, I would have his approach to sampling.
I love it. I love it. Well, intro 2, I wrote here, it's like it's another song starts. This whole part is 16 bars. A lone guitar panned off right is playing as a shaker is swirling around like it's going through a Leslie or a flange. On bar 7, 7, another guitar panned left is playing an arpeggiated guitar part. On bar 9, drums and bass are in, and the shaker is now doing accented rhythms, panned hard left and right. It's so cool what that shaker's doing. And again, I've heard this song how many times until I got it in the headphones and I'm really studying it. It's just great. This song, do you recall? I'm sure with the loops and stuff, was this recorded to everything to a grid, to a click?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah, I mean we were very used to that because again, this thing about the about me trying to figure out how the Shaman did it live. I figured out that we'd have to have some way of having the drummer play in time. So our drummer had been playing with a click track. I mean, fair play to him. He was a rock drummer. And then I said, yeah, you're a great rock drummer. Now I want you to do this kind of electro thing. So yes, he'd been playing to a click track since the middle of 1988. And we were very used to doing that. We did that a lot. There was no other way to do it. And in fact, the way you describe from when it's my guitar comes in, and actually on that point, the way you talk about things coming in bit by bit, that's how we had done it live anyway. So at that point, it becomes Jesus Jones, the live rock band. It's interesting you talk about the shaker being phased, and it was phased, and that's very much the influence of acid house, which I was talking about earlier on. Because the archetypal acid house sound is the Roland TB303 bass line, with the frequency being changed, so that it has the same effect in some way as phasing. So us using that shaker with a phaser is kind of saying, yeah, we're coming out of the era of acid house where TB303s are kind of going up, getting sharper and sharper and duller and duller. So well spotted. And actually, you've made me think of these things in a way that I hadn't done before. But yes.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'll tell you, probably my favorite part's going to come up now because we're going to get into these lyrics, which I have a general understanding of the song. I also have a general understanding of what the song meant to me. But there's some lyrics in here that one in particular that I've had wrong for 35 years now that I can't wait to talk to you about. But verse 1. A woman on the radio talks about revolution when it's already passed her by. Bob Dylan didn't have this to sing about. It feels good to be alive.
There's some interesting stuff in there. Talking about revolution, Tracy Chapman. Tracy Chapman, wonderful artist.
Yeah.
And the sentiment of her song, talking about revolution, is just that's fabulous. I latterly have come to see just how brilliantly focused she was, how well motivated, how wise she was, really.
Don't you know, talking about a revolution, it sounds like a whisper while they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time in the unemployment lines, sitting around waiting for a promotion. Don't you know?
But at that point in time, I had much more of a kind of reductionist view of things. I really just kind of I see one woman with a guitar doing what Bob Dylan did in the 1960s. And remember, this song is coming out of me saying about Simple Minds is like kind of the song's good, but you've got the sentiment wrong, and this is now reflected in the lyrics. In the kind of we're not in Bob Dylan's era, and it's, you don't need just one person on guitar. We're not doing a folk thing anymore. That's gone. These are new times, and these new times are bright and shiny and exciting, because the Berlin Wall has come down, massive event. So don't tell me about, don't give me this kind of Bob Dylan in 1964 kind of vibe. That seems out of place. And like I said, I dislike that line now of mine, because I don't think it does. I think it does Tracy Chapman a disservice, and I think kind of owe her an apology, really.
Wow. I mean, when you started talking about Tracy Chapman, I look at that first line, it just hit me over the head like a sledgehammer. A woman on the radio talks about revolution. Oh, again, I had no idea that's what you were referencing. I just think it's so cool. The same instrumentation carries over here through from the intro, except for those accents on the shaker. They're not here in this part. And the next part that we come to, Mike, I'm calling pre-chorus 1. I was alive and I waited. I was alive and I waited for this.
Yeah, and this, I think if you were growing up in the 80s, if you were not a child, if you were more than a child in the 80s, then I think you were very aware that of the Cold War, and we spent a lot of the time thinking there was an imminent nuclear threat, that it really could be over really before you knew it. Like even before the warnings came out, there'd be some giant mushroom cloud on the horizon. And that was really the way that we felt. Especially, in Europe, we're not that far away from Russia, and we weren't that far away from Eastern Europe, obviously.
Sure.
So yeah, the threat of nuclear war was very real, and it did hang over us, and I think it affected the psyche. So that when the Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Union kind of collapsed, there was this massive release of tension that you hadn't really realized was there all these years. Although, your kind of anxiety being piqued by various films and television shows on the BBC about what it might be like in the immediate aftermath of a nuclear strike. So yeah, it was. And the other thing as well is the enormity of that, because the Soviet Union seemed like this huge, solid edifice that would always be there. It was going to be like, massive cliffs riding out of the sea somewhere, that it would always be there, and you'd always have that around. But then, of course, like massive cliffs over the sea, it ended up collapsing. But to see it happen in my lifetime, even 2 years before, I would not have believed that would have happened, that the Berlin Wall would have come down. It was inconceivable.
Right. Well, and we all grew up with our boogeyman, and, I don't care where you're from. I mean, we were taught early, from knee high to a grasshopper. I was a young kid. Oh, Russia bad, and you live under that fear. My father remembers, him telling me about, they would have drills, Cold War drills and whatnot in the schools, and that was something they would talk to their youth about. We get our first harmonies in the song. I was alive and I waited, and also on the line, I was alive and waited for this. The floppy disk brass joins in, as does a lone tambourine, playing sporadic hits here in pre-chorus 1. That tambourine is panned off right. And then we get into chorus 1 at the 49-second mark.
Right here, right now, there is no other place I wanna be. Right here, right now, watching the world wake up from history.
Right here, right now. There is no other place I want to be. Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history.
Yeah, the Watching the World Wake Up from History is referencing, is it Francis Fukuyama, I think the guy's name is, wrote a book called The End of History. which in my arrogant youth I thought was such a stupid idea. I'm not really sure what the book is about, but I did get the overall impression that the events of 1989 kind of may have upset him, having written that book. So yeah, that's referencing a kind of a book of the time that was very very influential on a lot of people, I think.
International bright young thing.
Hey everybody, don't go anywhere. We got lots more coming up with Mike Edwards after a few words from our sponsors.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
What makes a song a smash on the charts? Is it talent? Luck? Timing? Well, as chart analyst and pop critic Chris Molanphy would say, it's all that and more. Chris hosts Hit Parade, a podcast from Slate, where he tells tales from more than a half century of pop chart history. Through storytelling, trivia, and song snippets, he dissects how the artists you love or hate dominated the airwaves and shaped your memories forever. He's explained why Steely Dan is yacht rock and Jimmy Buffett isn't, why girl groups dominated the early 60s and boy bands the late 90s, how the members of disco band Chic wrote a bass line that launched hip-hop, how Taylor Swift pivoted from country to pop, how Sam Cooke invented soul and James Brown invented funk, and what exactly a one-hit wonder is, and whether the band a-ha is a one-hit wonder. I think you'd really like it. So for Tales of the Hits from Coast to Coast, make sure to follow Hit Parade wherever you get your podcasts. Hey friends, have you been loving Krista Makes a Podcast? Well, spread the love by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't hesitate to share what you enjoy about the show in an actual written review on Apple Podcasts. Not only does it help more people discover us, but we often read reviews in the wrap segment of the show. It's a quick, cost-free way to support us and takes just a minute of your time. Your reviews mean the world to us and help us keep the podcast thriving. Thank you for being a listener, and thank you for being a friend.
And now, back to the show.
I don't know the answer to this question. I probably could have researched it real quick, but I know that there's popular songs, pop songs called Right Now. But were there any songs called Right Here, Right Now? Did anybody use that as a refrain in a song prior to this track, to your knowledge?
Not that I was aware of, but the key thing is I was writing this in a rush because I was excited about it, and I always struggle with writing lyrics anyhow. And Right Here, Right Now is actually one of the few lyrics I've written that I don't mind. But the only thing I didn't like about the song was the title. And I thought, well, I'll change that. I'll come up with something better, and then I'll change it. And then, we were just so busy. I never got around to it. Then I got used to it, and then it's only doing things like this, talking about it, I'm reminded that I always thought it was a rubbish title. But no, I wasn't aware of anyone else writing that, because it's a terrible title. Why would anyone do that?
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting you say that, because for the past 3 or 4 days, Mike, I have been transfixed on those 4 words in that order, right here, right now, just for the simplicity of it. We're constantly trying to think of ways to express ourselves in song that didn't happen prior, that didn't happen before, and this is a pretty simple lyric, but gosh, it says so much. It's so good, and how it ties up here with watching the world wake up from history is just brilliant. I believe there's double lead vocals here in this chorus.
Yeah, that's kind of standard practice for me. I tend to do that in all my choruses. I should probably stop doing it.
Yeah, it was good enough for John Lennon. It was good enough for everybody, I guess.
Well, that's one of the reasons I do it, because Lennon did so much of his choruses double-tracked.
Absolutely. Well, there's a good mix of lower notes and higher notes with those horn synths. And I'm also hearing a whisper track right here, right now.
You're right about that. I've forgotten that. But yeah. The that would have been a Martin idea. The double track would have been me. The harmonies would have been me. But you mentioned earlier on, I think a tambourine. That's Martin. The whispered thing. That's Martin as well.
The whispered thing is one of those, you know, you don't really think about it. And this saying is so stupid. You don't hear it, but you feel it. But it is true. It's a production trick. When used correctly, it's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. But that, again, I'm full of admiration for Martin. He's very, very good at that kind of thing. The subliminal stuff, he's extremely good at.
It's so good. Well, there's a 2-bar turnaround. It's just the drum loop and a swirling synth pan left to right before we get into verse 2. Here's that lyric in question. Everywhere I've read it, it says the same thing. It says, "Oh, I saw the decade in when it seemed the world could change at the blink of an eye."
Yeah.
And if anything, then there's your sign of the times. So you get your Prince reference, but all these years, for 35 years until about 3 days ago, I thought it was, I saw the decade end.
It wouldn't have made much difference, would it? That works just as well.
I guess not, but I got chills thinking about it because that lyric to me meant so much to me when I was an 18-year-old going to university. I'll never forget hearing that lyric. I saw the decade end. It's like, this is a new beginning. It felt triumphant. It felt good. And I kept looking at sites. I'm like, it has to be end. It has to be end. But no, it's in. What were you trying to say with that line? I saw the decade in.
Well, it's just when the song was written. It was written in December 1989. So yeah, that's all that is. But I think, to what you're saying, it would make no difference. I think it has the same effect on the listener if I saw the decade end or I saw the decade in. It doesn't matter. It's the end of one, the beginning of another. It's the same thing. It brings about the same feelings. The passing of one era, the introduction of another. It makes no difference. And I'll probably start singing the decade end from now on because it's in my mind. I forget, But
I love that lyric. Has anybody talked to you about that particular lyric before? I don't know what it is about the way you sing it. Maybe you had to be there. Maybe you had to be that 18-year-old kid at college and experiencing those things. But what a great lyric.
Yeah, no, it hasn't been talked about before, but I'm glad that you like it. Like I said, it's one of the few that I'm actually fairly pleased with. That's unusual for me. I'm just a guitarist, really.
I love it. Well, verse 2 has the same overall instrumentation as verse 1. There's a snare left out here after I. It's such a cool little hiccup not present in verse 1.
That stop in the second verse, yeah. Yeah, that as far as I recall, that was written like that, just to put some, a little bit of impact, just shake things up a little bit in the second verse so people don't think it's all entirely predictable.
Yeah, I really like that. And then we get a falsetto hook. I'm calling this a hook. This one time in the song on Sign, you get that falsetto. How'd that come about? Was that how you were singing it, or was that just something Martin suggested?
No, that's just how I wrote it. It's just how I did it. But it's interesting. I was, how old was I when we did that? I'd be about 25, I think. And even then, when I listened to that recording, you can hear that it probably took me several takes to get a decent version of that, and that's way beyond me now. Several decades later, I can't get that note anymore. Ian actually often tends, the keyboard player, he tends to do that falsetto now when I'm doing he does it behind me as I'm doing a lower note. You'll find this with a lot of singers as they get older. They'll change keys or they'll change the lines. It's interesting watching Bono these days, and with U2, the way they're obviously a guy who thinks about his singing in a creative creative way, but also in a practical way. Like, how am I going to get through another 10 stadium shows trying to sing like
Yeah.
a snotty 19-year-old? It's just one of
Right.
those tricks that you have to learn as a singer. And I always hope that the audience don't feel shortchanged by not having those bits. You haven't reassured me, I have to say, because you're referring to as a hook and emphasizing it. But what can I say? That's even at the age of 25, it was a push, and now, no way.
Well, you see comments from people. They're like, "Oh, I saw so and so in concert. He's 68 years old and he can't hit the notes." It's like, well, you go put on the pads from high school football and get out there on the field and see what you can do. You're going to have to improvise your game, kid. Your knees and your back aren't the same.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the same thing as when people say, wow, look at you guys, you look so different. It's like, yeah, well, we'll get a picture of you from the 1990s out and see what you look like. We'll have a laugh at that. So.
The first time someone told me I looked old, I was 29 years old. I made a video. We did a video for a song, and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, they got old." And I remember thinking, like, if I'm old now at 25, I give up. I never cared. Call me old after that.
Yeah.
Right here on the last line, then there's your sign. There's a cool pause that gives a little tension between sign and when you say "of the times." That's not present in verse 1. I like that right there. It kind of, like I said, provides a little bit of tension before we get into pre-chorus 2.
I was alive and I waited. I was alive and I waited for this. Right here, right now.
Same lyric, harmonies on every one of these lines. I was alive and I waited. I was alive and I waited for this. And then we get right here, right now. But this is a fake out piece of the chorus to set up for the solo. The right here, right now is just vocals over held out synths, a single bass note, and that shaker. A drum hit and a horn stab then takes us into the 16-bar guitar solo. Guitar solo is interesting. This is for lack of a better term, an alternative song. It has a drum loop. It has some elements that weren't necessarily 80s. You're ushered into a new decade here. But the guitar solo was very prominent, very big thing in 80s rock songs. We get kind of a rock guitar solo in this song. It's awesome.
Well, that's a tip to where the band had come from. Jen, the drummer, and I, we decided in 1978 that we were going to be in a band and we were going to be famous. And in those days, living where we lived, it was pretty much the law that you had to listen to Black Sabbath and AC/DC and Status Quo and Deep Purple, so we grew up kind of in the era of the guitar solos. And I guess it was really only kind of I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years later that they really just dropped away and you stopped getting them anymore. Certainly, I would never write a guitar solo in a song now. But the style of that guitar solo is part tribute because the original version had Jimi Hendrix playing all over that solo. It was, I thought, how cool would it be to sample Jimi Hendrix, to get loads of bits of Jimi Hendrix and have him play a solo in my song. And I play the odd bit. But again, Martin Phillips kind of said, yeah, I'd say it's a nice idea, but you probably prefer not to be sued. So I took his advice, and the way it was recorded, we actually recorded the guitar solo for reasons I can't remember in an entirely different studio from the rest of it. And Martin just said, all right, get in there. Here's my old Strat, because I didn't have a Strat. Martin did. So, going for the full Hendrix thing. He said, just go and play it. We'll play the track to you time and time again. Play it. And I would have done, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 takes, something like that. And then Martin said, all right, that's great. You can go home. I'll be here in the studio for another 4 hours. And he just took out all the little bits and pieces that he wanted from each take, and then that's a guitar solo. So it's definitely not a one take solo. It's a composite of multiple takes.
Yeah, and that's great. Sometimes the producer's the best person to build that solo. You know, they know what they're hearing, and I love the guitar solo here. It's not crazy, flashy Eddie Van Halen. Look at me. It fits the song. I think it fits the song beautifully. The production here gets a bit stripped back in this guitar solo section. As the guitar solo is front and center, no brass or loud synths are in this section. Drums, bass, shaker, and tambour are all here. And right at the end of the solo, we get a 3-note horn stab to bring us into pre-chorus 3.
I was alive and I waited. I was alive and I waited for this.
Same lyric. I was alive and I waited. I was alive and I waited for this. Harmonies all over everything. And then we drop down into chorus 3. The overall production is tucked down dynamically here. The horns are not present in this first third of chorus 3.
Right here, right now. There is no other place I wanna be. Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history. Right here, right now. There is no other place I wanna be. Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history. Right here, right now. There is no other place I wanna be. Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up.
The lyric, right here, right now. There is no other place I want to be. Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history. And it was at this time of the song, Mike, that it dawned on me. And I remember thinking this back in the day, maybe not fully realized the thought, but I remember thinking like, wow, it's only the second, chorus, and they only gave you right here, right now before the solo. Such a great, amazing chorus. Why would they have stopped that there? And I think the reason why is because we get it 3 times here at the end. And the first time's a little bit tucked down. The second time, same lyric. Right here, right now. There's no other place I want to be. Right here, right now. Watching the world wake up from history. But the horns come back in on this time. And then the third time we get another full set of lyrics, except the last line is watching the world wake up. We don't get history there. And on this third turnaround, Mike, a new high synth comes in. On the last line, there's no history on wake up. The guitar panned off left is playing the descending figure with the horns. No, 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 no. And the song comes to an end there. Talk about this last chorus. Was I on to something in saying they wanted to fake us out earlier because they were going to really hit us with this refrain later?
No, not really. Or yes, it depends how you look at it. And what I mean by that is that's my writing. I don't recall that Martin changed the structure of the song in any way. This is my I have to say, unfortunately, it's a bit of a standard approach for me to get the penultimate chorus to be a quiet, stripped down chorus. But the kind of stunted chorus where chorus 2 would be. Again, that's me. It's like the thing I said about the second verse. It's me trying to make it not wholly predictable, so that it's not just verse chorus. You know, the first 1 or 2 times you hear it, you're thinking, oh, I wasn't expecting that, and that's really what I was going for. But yeah, you know, you've got to get some kind of payback. I never thought of it in kind of advertising terms, marketing terms, but yeah, you want to keep repeating your tagline, I suppose. But also, I think musically, it's just more satisfying to kind of build that crescendo up, to keep it going up and up and up by repeating the choruses and lifting things up. You know, I think the synth you talked about might actually be the brass in a higher octave. Certainly, that's the way that it was written. Or it could be that Martin's used a synth to double it up. I can't remember now. But that's so everything is lifting up from that breakdown chorus until the very end is lifting up and up and up and up. And you can only get that with a decent duration, which means multiple choruses.
Couple things before we break that just amaze me. You know, I was a singer and a guitar player. I've gotten into samples and things later on, not so much even for my band, just messing around in the studio because I have the capabilities to do so. But I think of all the folks such as yourself, the late 70s, early 80s, when all these synths came out. Did you ever find yourself sitting there back then and you'd have these ideas in your head going, how do I execute these? And I think it was people like yourselves that went back to the synth companies and said, how do we do this? And I think that after a while, everyone put the pieces together and you know, technology wise, we're where we're at now. But did you ever sit there and say, how am I going to get this sample in the song, or how am I going to get it in time?
No, I was more of the mindset of working with what we have. And I just saw it all as kind of solving problems. That's often why I was talking earlier about how I have a fairly brutalist approach to sampling and stuff like that. So I would just kind of shoehorn things in any way I possibly could. So yeah, I was not one of those people that would go to a manufacturer and say, you know, it'd be really good if we could do this. I just accept what there was and make whatever I wanted to do work within that. But also kind of accepting that sometimes that would change. If you couldn't solve the problem in exactly the way you wanted it solved, you had a solution provided that was just as good an alternative. A little bit like seeing the decade end versus seeing the decade in. Same thing, you know.
I love it. And one last thing, you know, you guys had success with Liquidizer in '89, you know, definitely in the UK, and you felt that. And probably at that point, you were just elated. You were young. There were all these firsts happening. You were going on the road. People were idolizing you, etc. And all of a sudden, this thing hits. This was a global hit. What was that like?
Incredibly exciting. It was a frantic time, and it was, everything was really kicking off. It was strange because we'd been talking the talk through Liquidizer, saying, you know, what we're doing is exciting and new and in our minds important. And it's all very well saying that, but if you kind of, your singles aren't really getting into the charts and the album's doing well, people like you, the critics like you, but you haven't really got much in the way of commercial success. You know, you're not the new Beatles. And it was really with Doubt, with Real, and then Right Here, Right Now, where suddenly all the things we'd been talking about started to happen. So it was a strange mixture of excitement and feeling justified, but also incredulity. It's a little bit like the kind of fake it till you make it thing, and then we'd been faking it, and then suddenly we made it, and we didn't really know what to do. It was a strange scenario. What's the next step meant to be? That was our mindset. That was it was quite in a way it was disconcerting.
Yeah, there's no pamphlet 101 on what do you do after you have a huge mega song? What's your next step? You know, and you'd be lying if you say, I wasn't thinking of, geez, what do we do now? Who would ever expect that type of meteoric rise? And it's so cool. You know, how many bands are out there, great bands that never had a hit single, and you, my friend, had a massive song. Congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, I've been very grateful for it ever since. It's a song that almost wrote itself. I think the whole thing must have taken, the actual writing maybe half an hour. The recording and everything as well, maybe a couple of hours in total. The recording at home, I mean, the demo. Because of that song, we're still going out and playing it now, how many years later? 33 or whatever it is.
That's humbling and refreshing. I absolutely love it. Before we break, what's going on with you or Jesus Jones? I understand your latest album, Passages, was released in April of 2018. What's coming up with the band?
Yeah, well, it's still writing. Although that was the last album, albums seem to be a strange kind of old-fashioned thing to do. We've released several songs since then. And I'm actually working on 3 at the same time now, which is quite a nice thing to do. And that's because there's a new kind of surge of interest for us in what we do. Ian, the keyboard player, has taken over managing the band, and as a result, we've started just doing a lot more. We're playing shows all over the place. We have been playing in the US a couple of times this year, if not more. We're doing a lot of stuff in the UK. You talked about EMF earlier on. In October, we're doing a few dates in the UK with EMF, and that's something that we're hoping we'll bring to the US as well, because we've always been pretty close with them. Some parts of the band in particular, Jerry and Alan, our guitarist and bass player, know them really well. But they're great guys. We were with them recently, did a festival in Milwaukee, and they were there, and they were just lovely, really nice guys. We get on well. So we'd love to hang out with them and go and play Unbelievable and Right Here, Right Now on the same stage, same night, which is something we strangely have never done before.
I love that. Were you at Summerfest?
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. You guys were both there. That's a great festival.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? Yeah, it's
yeah.
It was our second time. I think we played about 5 years ago, maybe. Yeah, really good festival. I mean, it shuts Milwaukee down. It's on an epic scale. It's fantastic.
My band, Less Than Jake, played Summerfest in 2009 for the first time. And that whole day, every little girl you'd see had a I Love Justin shirt on. And then you kept seeing these guys with these bob haircuts. I'm like, what's going on? And that was the first time I ever heard of Justin Bieber. He was headlining Summerfest. I was like, what is this phenomenon going on? I've been living under a rock. Yeah.
Wow. I was going to joke that he was playing there. Wow. Fair play to him. Nice.
Yeah. Who knew? He was headlining over my band then, and he's still doing the same now.
Yeah,
so what are you gonna do?
Same for me.
That was a good one. I love Jesus Jones, so I cannot wait to talk to Chris about this episode in the wrap segment. It's coming right up after a few words from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Chad Nicefield.
And this is Justin Press.
We're the host of Making Waves, the Shiprock podcast, a part of the Sound Talent Media Podcast Network. We're inviting you to sail away with us on an epic journey in musical enlightenment. Every week, we bring you only the best artists in rock music and discuss everything from the cruise to the stage to the saga of being a professional recording artist. We'll have lots of special guests along the way, so tune in every week.
Your stateroom is available every Monday morning, so welcome aboard.
Hey, what's up? My name's Lurk, and I'm the host of Lambgoat's Van Flip podcast. Every week, I have in-depth conversations with bands from all over the scene, big and small. We also like to keep our finger on the pulse and showcase up-and-coming bands on the show as well. So come check out Lambgoat's Van Flip podcast.
Hey there, Krista Makes a Podcast listeners. Ready to take your podcast experience to the next level? By signing up for the supporting cast at KristaMakes.com, you not only ensure the continued production of our show, but also unlock exclusive perks. Subscribers receive a weekly bonus episode of our other podcast, The After Party, co-hosted by Chris Fafalius and myself. Many fans rave that The After Party is just as enjoyable as the main show. And with close to 200 music-centric episodes in the archive, there's a treasure trove of entertainment awaiting you. Thank you for tuning in and for your support in keeping the podcast going strong. Join us at KristaMakes.com and let's keep the fun conversations going.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Krista Makes a Podcast, email your best song via MP3 only and a short bio to bandyoumighttnotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is Public Squares, a new wave band created by interdimensional beings who inhabit human bodies for the purpose of recording and performing. And those beings are Thuck Apton, who inhabits the body of Brandon Abate, Regulus 9, who inhabits the body of Stephen Manko, and Dr. Rex Reason, who inhabits the body of Bill Kowalczyk. Here's a snippet of their song, Go Medium.
Suicide scene doesn't feel like West at all. No. Do you wanna party with me? Do you wanna party with me? 'Cause if you wanna party with me, come in here. Do you wanna party with me?
Chris and Chris.
Chris, the sound of Jesus Jones is like the sound of the start of the 90s to me. And I love that. I know you had that experience. You were starting college. I was a kid. I bought the cassette single of Right Here, Right Now, probably on my same trip to the mall where I bought EMF Unbelievable. They were both popular at the same time and both doing that mix of house and rock and hip hop influences and everything at that same time. And it's just such an uplifting and fun sound that just puts me right back at that time.
Sure. And with everything in life, there's haters, but I don't recall any of my hard rock, metal friends, punk friends, anybody hating Jesus Jones. Anybody saying, oh, I hate that song or I hate that band. Well, what was there to hate about it? It's just catchy.
Yeah.
It's fun.
It's a great rock song. It was a fresh sound at the time. I loved it. I still love it. And I'm so excited that Mike came on for this episode. How cool was it that he grabbed 2 bars from a Prince song and turned that into an entire song?
I know. And how many times we heard it on this show straight out of Mike's mouth. He said he wrote the song in a half hour. It was recorded very quickly. And I'm sure, I didn't ask him, but I'm sure there's other songs in his catalog that he belabored over and it took forever. And this one just off the cuff, here it is.
Yeah, it's also pretty ambitious at that time. Now, I know technology had come along since the 80s, and I know there were a lot of people sampling music throughout, the 80s, but still, it's not like it is today. You and I could go sample something. We could rip the MP3 off of YouTube and loop it in a Logic session right now and sample something, but it wasn't quite as easy back then.
No, and I love what Mike said when I asked him about it. I said, were you ever laying there at night going, how do I do this? He said, no, you just work with what you had. I guess it'd be like you and I trying to think now of what's going to be in the future, AI and all this stuff. It's like you could drive yourself crazy thinking about what can be, but you work with what you have now. But I didn't know what his answer was going to be to that question.
It's funny how you work within your toolbox, within your sandbox. It's like me. Hey, when I demo songs, Chris, for the most part, 99% of the time, I'm using the sounds that are within Logic, like the stock sounds, because I'm just trying to get an idea down. And that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff there. But when I have all these friends who are way more into it and have 50,000 different plugins and everything, I'm fine with it. I work within what I have here. And that's what he did, except he had way less options than we have just with like stock sounds in a Logic or Pro Tools session.
Well, right. And let's talk about how it was refreshing to me to hear him talk about the one song on the record, Right Here, Right Now, was produced, not co-produced, as I erroneously said to Mike, produced by Martin Phillips. And he was just fine with that. Oh, Martin's brilliant. He did this, he did that. A lot of times you'll find songwriters that have that ego, or like, oh, yeah, he produced that track, but I produced it with him. No, he gave the accolades to Martin on this one. And I thought that was very humble and very cool of him to say.
It's interesting too, because that sounds like they knew that this was the song. Like, we got to bring in an outside producer. We got to get another set of ears on this one because this has real potential to be a hit. I mean, I'm assuming that anyway.
I wish I would have asked that. Yeah, I'm wondering. Yeah. Have to call him back. Hey, got one more question for you.
Also, I would have never known that the woman on the radio, singing about revolution, the first line of the song is Tracy Chapman. Because,
yeah.
Dude, the song Talking About a Revolution, which is a Tracy Chapman song from 1988, it was a minor hit. It went to like number 85 or something on the Hot 100. Like, Fast Car was obviously the hit, but I would have never guessed that was Tracy Chapman. He said he owes her an apology or something. I don't think so. I think like citing her song in this massive, cool hit is pretty cool. I think she'd like that.
Well, and I chose my words carefully, but let's talk about Right Here, Right Now. How simple that is. We talk about those lyrics like, oh, it's hit me over the head simple. Well, yeah, you didn't think of it. It's like, well, why couldn't I have thought of that? And, I'm sure that there is titles with that song and there's songs out there, but nothing to this, the gravity of this hit. Do you know of other songs? I know Van Halen had Right Now, but Right Here, Right Now?
I don't know another Right Here, Right Now, but when he was kind of playing it off like, it's a stupid title, whatever, I think that's a great title because now, when I hear this song, it puts me back to then. I hear Right Here, Right Now. I think right there, right then, 1991, it puts me back there. And at the time, it feels revolutionary or something. Like we're in the most important and the most historic moment in time. That's how the song makes me feel. It's like a triumph, you know?
Yeah, well, it's a historical document in a sense, watching the world wake up from history. I mean, you were young, but I remember my teacher wheeling in a TV and VCR to play the Berlin Wall getting torn down.
Yeah.
And that was huge. And then 2 years later, going to college and hearing that lyric, and I told Mike, I thought it was decade end. It's in, which is here nor there, but I saw the decade end. To me, it was just like, yeah, I did see that.
Yeah.
I lived that. And now I'm here in this new decade. And, for me, it was just an exciting time. All these news. I was in college and there was, bands to see in great record stores and everything was new coming at me a million miles an hour.
Yeah, true. Hey, I want to go back to the sampling for 1 second, Chris. What a good decision to replay that part instead of sampling the Prince song or sampling the Jimi Hendrix song, because I think it was right around this time, if I remember correctly. I don't know if it was 91 or 92. Remember we did our Biz Markie episode?
Yep.
Well, Biz Markie was the first person they dropped the hammer on with that, so Jesus Jones might have got washed right away with that wave too of like, yo, we're not making any money from our song because we got to pay for all these samples.
Yeah, well, that was producer Martin Phillips' call on that one, and good for him making that call, because Jimi Hendrix's estate would have definitely had some more money with this song. It was so huge. And speaking of money, if you want to spend some money, you can head over to Krista Makes. How was that for a segue?
That was a good one. I like that one.
You can head over to KristaMakes.com. That's our supporting cast, which is like a Patreon, and you can help us out. For the price of a cup of coffee or two a month. You get bonus episodes of The After Party, where my trusted host, co-host and producer Chris Afalius joins me each week to give you bonus fodder, everything from music to sports to trivia and everything in between. Did I miss anything?
Do we talk about sports on there?
Yes, we have.
Well, yeah, I guess
we have.
I guess we have some sports history
we have.
in certain episodes.
Yes.
Speaking of money, if you want to give us some money, that was a very good segue, Chris. But it's not much money, but it does help us continue making this show at KristaMakes.com. And you get a bonus episode every week. Plus, you get the entire back catalog, which, Chris, at this point, it's like 200 episodes, fun episodes. We do trivia episodes. We do music history episodes. We just, everything you could imagine, our experiences in music. We've done episodes about Chris's experiences in Less Than Jake and stuff like that. A lot of stuff for very little money.
You're not going to know how cool it is, so you go sign up, KristaMakes.com. Go check it out. And hey, if you've been listening the past month or so, 2 months, we've been giving you, Chris has been giving you, reading you the reviews that you've been giving us on Apple Podcasts. Those 5-star reviews are awesome. I don't know if he has one to read right now. If he does, cool. If not, leave one anyways, because they help us out.
Of course I have one, Chris.
Let's hear it.
All right, Chris. Well, this is a 5-star review we got from To Last Exit, who gave us 5 stars and wrote, the best songwriting and music podcast. They said, this is the best songwriting and possibly best music podcast around. Chris takes a lot of time to research the songs and the subjects and has genuine enthusiasm for every song he covers, even if it's not his style. It's very refreshing to listen to, and it's genuinely worth a listen, parentheses, or 100. So thanks so much to Last Exit. Chris, you do have a lot of enthusiasm on the show, and myself and everyone who listens appreciates that enthusiasm.
Yeah, absolutely. To Last Exit, thank you very much. And I got to tell you, I'm gonna throw it back. I'm volleying back to you, Chris. It's all in the editing, okay? It has about this much to do with me. It's all in the editing, but thank you very much. Keep those reviews coming. What a great episode, Chris. I was... Probably 2 weeks ago, I heard this song, I don't know, in the store somewhere, and I called you. I said, right here, right now, we got to find him. And I mean, within 3 hours, you had spoke to Ian, who is now the manager, and we got this episode. So thank you.
Hell yeah.
And I want to wrap this up by saying thanks to this week's guest, Mr. Mike Edwards, and we'll see you next week.
One Hit Thunder is a podcast where we both celebrate and have a good laugh about bands and artists that had just one hit that we all know. Each week, we're joined by a guest from the world of music or comedy to learn more than you ever thought you would about some songs that you can't forget. And we decide if they brought the one-hit thunder or were nothing more than a one-hit blunder. Look, if you listen to the show, you're probably going to laugh, and I guarantee you're going to crush next time the bar has music trivia. Tag Team, Jane Child, Meredith Brooks, Looking Glass, Sean Mullins, Eiffel 65, EMF, Crash Test Dummies, Crazy Town, Chumbawamba. We have hundreds of episodes in our back catalog and a new episode each week, so pass the Dutchie, make sure you're connected, and subscribe to One Hit Thunder wherever you get your pods.
PenFed Free Checking offers zero fees and zero balance requirements for zero hassle. PenFed Access America Checking lets you earn money on your balance for dreams big and small. Choose the best account for you and start making the most of your money. Learn more at PenFed.org. Federally insured by NCUA. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed Credit Union.
Hey there, it is Ryan Seacrest with you. Do you want to make this summer unforgettable? Join me at Chumba Casino. It's this summer's hottest online destination. They are rolling out the red carpet with an amazing welcome offer just for you. So don't wait. Dive in now and play hundreds of social casino games for free. Your chance to redeem real prizes is just a spin away. Care to join me?
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.